thank you for coming. I realize some of you are actually here to see what I'm going to say, and you're worried about the future of the business school. Many of you are here, in addition to that, just to support me, and I really appreciate that. Without further ado, though, some of what we're going to talk about initially, we discussed in some form in convocation, so there'll be a little bit of repeat there, but we have members of staff and others who weren't in there, and so some discussion of that, I think, is warranted. And then we'll get into some of the things that we didn't have time then and some additional material, and then we'll get into Q&A. So I was given a really long title to present on, and so I condensed it to this. How are we going to distinguish ourselves? So I talked to you earlier about, well, first, before I get to that, I'm going to present a number of ideas here, and I'm not claiming that all of these ideas are mine. Many of these ideas have come from you. I think a good leader needs to surround himself or herself with a lot of good people, usually, hopefully better than they are, and we want to work on those ideas together. So please don't, as I discuss something, please don't infer that I am claiming these as my ideas. I'll try to shout out at times, but I might forget at times where an idea may have come from. And also there are times when I might say something that you thought of independently of me, and that's fine too. Not all these ideas are, I think they're important, but some of them are sometimes obvious in certain circumstances. So I earlier talked about the analogy of the Christmas cactus, right? We live in a desert. A Christmas cactus, in our house, our cactus has easily 100 different little branches coming out of it, and about twice a year it blooms and blossoms. And the blossoms are so thick that they cover the entire plant. It's beautiful. And I like that as a metaphor for what we're trying to accomplish in terms of a vision for where the WSB needs to be going. We need to be Utah's business school of choice because of what we do here and because of the value we create in the economy. I would love to see our graduates, thousands of them in every organization in Utah and beyond, competently trained so that they start day one with the skills they need to be successful then, and with the skills they need to launch vertically into a great career. And eventually, many of them would be viewed as heroes in their companies because of what they brought to the table. If we can accomplish that, that means that the WSB is going to be highly preferred by recruiters. Grads are going to get more offers, they're going to get higher offers. We're going to be preferred school by students, by various populations. That's going to help our enrollment. And we're also going to become the point of concentrated donations. People are going to see what we're creating. They're going to want to be a part of that. They're going to want to contribute to that. And all of this can happen, but it has to happen on a strategy that isn't just being the low-cost leader. We have to have a position that resonates, and we can't take a position of the other schools in the state because, you can't take a position from someone else, right? That's the first rule of marketing. Those of you who forgot your marketing, first rule of marketing, you must claim a position, and that position must be different in important ways from your competitors. We've already got a positioning at the university level. We'll get into that. Let me show you the obligatory dual mission slide, right? So we're talking about mission here. And I think every dean candidate has shown this slide or a version of it. What's interesting about this slide is dual mission is the focus of the university, and there's some really nice elements that come from that. But a lot of what we do is at that 3,000 and 4,000 level. And so this community college part of that dual mission is maybe less emphasized in what we're doing. We have some associate's degrees. For us, it's those certificates that are stackable that can lead into those 4-year degrees and into graduate school that actually kind of take the stage in this space. But for me, in terms of where I think we should be going, and some of you have heard this, is it means we really need to be focusing on that column there on the left side. It's that teaching. What we do needs to be heavily based in our teaching in terms of position. Love this clicker. I showed you this educational, a preliminary model of how I think about this. Our vision, again, is thousands of 5-star careers throughout the state and beyond. What does that come from? Well, that's got to come from really great placement, and that placement is not going to happen without true kind of exceptional teaching, true T1. Those of you who haven't seen this before, there you go. You'll see some of our pillars there that we've talked about in our strategy, including placement and T1. Other things like retention and connected and some of these other elements that we've talked about in our strategy historically, we're going to find down here in this support space, although I haven't explicitly listed them, but I'm deliberately de-emphasizing those if you're in the business school and are familiar with that. There's another really important component there, and that's what is the culture that exists in the business school? And we'll talk more about that today. We didn't have time to talk about that last time. Some of you might be familiar with Amazon's flywheel, right? They're very famous for, this is a core model that they use initially to build their business. And the idea is customer experience is king. When customers get a really great experience, then that's going to drive customers to the site. That's your traffic. And because the traffic is there, the traffic attracts sellers, and the sellers then bring a great selection. And so that's a reinforcing loop, and it's a dual-sided market, right? You've got sellers and you've got buyers. And in this, what's the secret that makes this all work? Well, the growth has to come from this outer loop where customer experience also comes from lower prices. Lower prices come from a low cost structure. So then Amazon says, in order for us to grow and be successful, we need to we've got to do all of these well, but we need to put a lot of emphasis in a lower cost structure because, the low prices and the selection, Amazon at the time was defining customer obsession as those two inputs into customer experience. Lower cost, lower prices, and selection. That was an obsession with customer experience. We operate in a dual-sided market as well. We have recruiters and we have students. And it's actually not that difficult to, thank you. It's not that difficult to use this as a model for what we're doing to maybe gain an insight or two or to explain why teaching is so important to us. So here's the same model. Our customer are recruiters, right? Students are our product. Recruiters are our customer. So we really care about the recruiter experience. If recruiters get a great experience, they're going to come and they're going to hire our graduates. That's placement into these 5-star careers that we're chasing. Well, there aren't going to be any placement or 5-star careers without students, but the students, when they see that we're placing well, they're going to want to come and say, hey, I want to be a student at UVU because I'm going to get a great career when I come out of the business school. Well, when the students come, they are our product, remember. And so the students are the resources that will allow us to create, just like Amazon Selection, to allow us to create our offering of programs. And we can start being product managers and treating each program as a product, okay? And then you see what our customer obsession is. Just like with Amazon, for them it was selection and it was low prices. For us, our customer obsession is our programs, which need to be what the market needs now. And this term that we talked about last time, alpha, right? In finance, this idea that, thank you for coming, Carrie, that I first heard from Carrie. This idea of, I've talked a lot about delta. How much change can we create in that student? But if a company needs to hire 8s, and we bring in a bunch of 4s and bring them up to 7, they're not going to be hired. In the end, the recruiter only cares about alpha. How much extra value will that graduate create for my company? But where does alpha come from? Alpha comes from our ability to teach much better than what students can get anywhere else. Now, I've heard complaints about this. In marketing, if you go to a service firm, almost any small service firm and many medium service firms, you'll ask them, what is your position? What is it that makes you different than everybody else? And they're going to tell you, we really care about our customers. All of them, right? I see some people laughing and nodding their heads. This is what I call generic differentiation. And if you go to any community college and many universities that can't compete at the R1 level in research, you say, what is it that makes you different? And say, we're great teachers. We teach. So we have to really have metrics that show that we are dramatically better in outcomes that matter before we can claim credibly that we're a T1 institution. In the product space, if we're in product management, we often talk about having, the product can't be 10% better or 30% better. People don't notice that. It's got to be 3 times better before people say, that's better. That's worth shifting for. I'll leave this product and I'll go to that product because it's that much better. We need those kinds of outcomes. And so you can also define customer obsession, programs and well-trained students. That's our recruiter obsession. Great programs that are the right topics at the right time, and students that are really well trained because we're great teachers. This is our flywheel. Our growth comes ultimately from that T1 space. But it has to be real T1 and not a generic differentiation. So what do we do with this? If T1's our position. First of all, what do I mean by T1? The university has branded itself with the term engage. We own that word. And engage is a message of, come to UVU, we care about teaching, you're going to get a better learning experience here than anywhere else in the state. And that message has resonated with a lot of people. I think that engaged message is a major contributor to the success we've seen at UVU. T1, I think, is a step above engage, and we need a way to define it. And I look at what we're doing right now that I think is our T1 efforts, and that's where we get multi-X performance increases. If we're doing something 2 times better, not 10% better, not 30% better, if we're doing it twice as good, 3 times as good, 5 times as good, 10 times as good, I think there's probably at least one program in each of the departments where we can find some key end metrics where we can find that kind of a result. In the past, I talked about the CFA prep that Kerry's been doing with his students. I've talked to, some of you are familiar with what Ron's been doing and Dustin's been doing in their classes with statistics. I'm sure there's some good things happening in Dave's. I'm naming names, so now I got to name them all. The PFP program and number of offers that those PFP students get coming out of their program. I mean, we have pockets where we are realizing T1 outcomes, where the outcome is so good compared to the market that if we can get that message out and people believe that message, we can develop this reputation because that difference is big enough that it's human noticeable, okay? I talked about some other quick issues. We can't be T1 if we don't know what we're talking about. Research plays a critical role in that. And some of you are reviewing our RTP criteria document. One of the efforts there is to try to lift our research a little bit out of that space where there might be predatory journals. We've talked about impact. This is, if you haven't heard me talk about true and useful, which I originally got from Jim in our Delta committee 7 years ago, then we probably haven't met yet. But it's so crucial that our researchers figure out what's true, but then they have to couple with our practitioners to figure out what's true, what's useful. In the same sense, our practitioners might know what's being used in industry and what we believe is useful, but some of what our practitioners believe and what we believe is folklore, and we need to couple that with the research to figure out what's true. And that simple message is more rare in the other institutions of higher learning that I've had experience with than I originally expected it would be. We've talked about our PACs and DACs. I don't want to go through all these. These are just some of the things that we mentioned. And the 80-20 rule is this idea of, do we teach too much in our classes? Is it better to find the few concepts that make a big difference and teach them longer and better and more engaged, and cut out these concepts that they only might use never, or once or twice, right? So there's a head-tail problem anytime when we're talking about what we're including in our programs in terms of courses, in our courses in terms of content. There's another issue this is new. How do we prioritize what we're doing? I've always thought that pedagogy was really, really important. How we teach what we teach so that learning increases. Is it evidence-based? That's some of the things that we were talking about in the last slide. It's so critical. But it's the least important thing. If I'm prioritizing different areas, pedagogy is the least important thing, because I'd rather teach you something true poorly than teach you something false really, really well. And so curriculum has to be much more important than pedagogy. It's better to teach the right stuff bad than the bad stuff right. Yeah, I got it right. Lately, I thought that this is where it all was. I had a really good conversation with Bonnie and with Dave and some others, where we, also Sheldon and Jeff and Kevin, who was there. Above curriculum, it actually doesn't matter how good your content is if your students don't care to learn it. And so even more important than the curriculum is, how do we motivate our students to want to engage with that curriculum? And there's lots of things that are a part of that, but something that's really important here comes back to theory from marketing and psychology. There we go. This pyramid of motivation, right? Where does the motivation come from? Action comes from thoughts. Thoughts comes from emotions, right? If you don't have emotions, you can't make a decision, you can't make an action. But emotions are interpreted through our values, and our values come from our sense of identity. Who do we think we are? Who do we want to become? Identity is such a powerful motivator. I was talking with the deans earlier today in an earlier interview, and we'll talk about this later, but every student who comes in, if they just graduate with a degree and a goal, they're not going to have as big of an impact as if they graduate saying, this is who I am. If someone comes from the education school and they say, I have a plan, I have a career, I'm going to go teach, that's different than them graduating and believing, I am a teacher. I behave like a teacher. I engage everything from the perspective, that identity, which starts at some level and then continues to grow and improve over time, is crucial to all human motivation. So how do we leverage that in this space? Well, I don't want to criticize the university in an interview, so it's not criticizing, it's an observation. We now have a campaign it's based on research. They're trying to address this affinity problem. Students come to campus and they don't feel like they belong. And so we have this campaign, there's a place for you. I see the logic there. It makes sense. It's based on the affinity research that they were looking at, and there's some good research there. But if the ultimate motivator is identity, where does that identity come from in a student? I would propose to you that it comes from the faculty who are teaching those students, okay? I think about all my educational experiences, and the courses that I did well in, that I cared about, that I gave my best effort, was not because, some courses I took because I was forced to, some courses I took because I was interested, and if the professor was not a great teacher, then I became less interested in that thing, even if it was in my discipline, the thing that I had committed to. My favorite class in my MBA program was accounting. Oh, I said that out loud. Jim Stice at the Mary School of Management, as a admirable professor that I eventually, at that time, wanted to emulate, that had a huge impact on me. This emulation, this being able to see yourself in someone else is so critical. We see it, for example, I've talked to some of you about the research that a colleague of mine, Yeshim Orhun, at the University of Michigan. They did a study looking at gender and achievement between the student and the teacher. And they found that when male students had a male or female teacher, it didn't really influence their performance in terms of grades and scores. But female students, they scored lower under males by 1.5 grades than they did with females. And the hypothesis there is when they could see someone like them demonstrating that competence and success, that was more impactful on them. That goes back to this identity principle. When we see people we feel like we're like, or we want to be more like, and we want to emulate, we want to take on that identity, and it creates significant motivation. Some of you are familiar with Carrie's pancake breakfasts for the CFA prep. I used to think that was extra time because it was Saturdays that made the difference. Interpreted through this lens, I'm thinking it's maybe more, here's someone that they began to admire and respect, who knew, and that desire to achieve that, to be like that, to take on that identity was actually, I believe, the greater motivator that gave them the chutzpah to push and put the work in and take that, do their best on those tests and get those higher those higher pass rates. This also gives us answers when we're talking about face-to-face and online teaching. Right now, there's a study that Gary sent to me, Gary Johnson, I think it was in The Economist, it might have been Forbes, reporting on results of online versus face-to-face. And the online isn't doing as well, and it was a natural experiment. It's a pretty, if you look at the design, it's a pretty solid study. We don't know if we figure out how to practice online teaching optimally, we don't know where this ceiling is. But right now, on average, our own scores here and studies outside show that the results we get from online teaching aren't as high as we typically get from face-to-face for a variety of reasons. This theory is telling us that identity really matters. If you're going to run an automatic course online and those students can't connect with you, we lose that opportunity for them to take on that identity, to find that admiration. And I think that explains some of this gap. And Dustin's here, it's good. Dustin has a highly automated course, but he has a ton of social presence in there. He even has answered emails from students through video, so they get this customized answer straight to them, and they feel like, my professor, I've never met him, but he knows me. And that connection then creates a greater desire, I want to do well here, I want to do more here. That human connection becomes crucially important to our T1 efforts. So that's T1. Moving further into other things that I think need to make a difference, let's talk about culture. I talk about the education school. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So we can talk about strategy, but if we don't have a culture here at the WSB that reinforces all these ideas, that is aligned with our position, our mission, our vision, then it's like dragging an anchor behind us in a boat as we're trying to go forward. So going back to this pyramid, you've seen that before, you understand that. Let's see, where is it? The identity I think we need to be helping our students take on is the identity of being a leader. And this is an identity that every single one of us, if we have not yet, needs to take on. Every faculty member, every staff member, every administrator, everyone in the WSB, we create leaders. We need to act as leaders. We need to feel and become, in our own minds, that we are leaders, because we can't emulate that for our students if we don't feel it ourselves. There's a good definition from a friend of mine who used to be at Zant, and his definition of leader and organizational leadership, please don't cringe visibly if you don't like this definition, but I love it. A leader is someone who helps others get to a place they cannot yet see. So I'm not asking everyone to be bossy or to, you're only a leader if you're in a certain position. What I'm saying is every single person in their current sphere right now can take on an attitude of, there are people around me. I need to care about those people. That's the people around me. And I see where they could be. I see where we could be. I'm going to help us get there because they can't see it yet. I love the movement that's here. I love the idea of seeing something that doesn't exist yet. If every single one of our graduates left the business school believing in their hearts, I'm a leader, that means I help everyone around me get to places that I can see because I have vision. They don't see it yet, but I'll help them get there. That kind of identity is something that gives them, I think, can give them exponential results throughout their life and comes back in dividends to what we're trying to accomplish at the business school. I think we need to develop more so than we have now a culture where we all take on this identity of being a leader in this sense of the word. There are other elements in our culture that I want to address. I like the idea of carrying a radical candor. We need to be more open in the business school in our communications. We need to be more direct, but we also need to do it in a way where we're showing respect and care for the people we're interacting with. I think there's sometimes in some organizations a tendency for leaders to try to control the situation by limiting information. I think there's sometimes situations where people they don't want to face confrontation, and so they try to get work done in individual meetings and back rooms, and maybe there's a place for some of that some of the time, but maybe not. We need to move more toward a culture where we can openly disagree with each other while still respecting each other, caring about each other, still adopting the general vision where we all want to move forward. But we thrive sometimes on those disagreements because your disagreement with me helps me realize I was missing a piece. My disagreement with you helps you realize something that helps you identify a gap in that space. More information to you so that you have context. So this is something I want to move more toward in terms of our culture to get there. Another element of culture, I love the book, Turn the Ship Around. And I want the school to be a school of leaders, not one leader and a bunch of followers. I want us all to be leaders. And in order to do that, one, you've got to provide enough information and context, that's the transparency, that people can lead in whatever context they're at. They need information. You need information. You need context to be able to make decisions where you're at. Sometimes you need training, and maybe a lot of time. We all need training to bear the responsibility of that leadership so that we make better decisions. That has to be a part of that. But ultimately, you need to be empowered so that you can make decisions at that level, and then you don't have someone at the top making all the decisions for everybody. Everybody gets developed. New leaders rise as they practice these ideas, and it's a culture where we're all trying to lift each other. So I think there's room for improvement at the business school in these areas of culture, and I would like to encourage, I want to be pushing us in those directions. Inclusion is certainly crucially important for a couple of reasons. One, we needed the diversity of viewpoint. I think it's interesting that, so I fly back and forth between the Bay Area and Utah County, which is a little bit like hot water, cold water, hot water. Politically, they're very, very different. There are really great people in both places that I care about and respect and need their opinions on the problems that I face on a regular basis. But it's interesting, at Berkeley, the viewpoint diversity is probably pretty low. It's, political ideology is almost homogeneous. And so while they have diversity of many other attributes, here I think I experience more viewpoint diversity than I do at one of the places that most people would say is one of the most diverse places you might find in the United States. I think that's really interesting. That said, another really crucial reason that we need diversity is we need to figure out how do we make sure that every person in the business school feels like it's home, that it's a place for them, that they belong. Because when people don't feel that they belong, then they don't contribute, and we lose that contribution. And if they don't contribute, then this kind of multi-X growth and progress that I want us to get to it's never going to be realized. We've all got to kind of be along for that ride and be pushing forward together. Think of, the good analogy is a rowing competition, right? You got even one rower out of sync, and it's disastrous. But people aren't going to row together if we don't feel like we're all in it together and we understand each other. So that said, we've always had the effort to kind of foster inclusion in the dean's office, but I'd like to kind of make that its own role as we're restructuring what we're doing in the dean's office. There are a number of offices, as I'm looking at them, that have one dedicated person to a specific effort, and I think this could be really valuable. And everything we do certainly needs to be research-driven, evidence-driven. There's a lot of good scholarship out there, but there's also some scholarship out there that maybe is more accurately described as activism rather than scholarship. It needs to be good, based on good theory. And there's lots of interventions that we can engage in, and some that we already have. For example, our hiring practice right now have improved significantly, and in the marketing department, I think that's partly what helped us increase the outcomes in the marketing department in terms of the diversity that we've been able to hire. And not that I'm talking about diversity as though it's really important, it is, but what's way more important are the people we hired. I'm so glad to have them in our department. Of course, I'm in the interim dean's position, and so all the departments are valuable to me, not just the marketers. So I just have a few more thoughts. That's the big picture, but certainly there's some critical logistical issues. So just a couple more minutes. One, we need resources in order to accomplish what we're going to achieve. Those resources, they can come from donation and fundraising, they can come from executive education, and they can come from tuition and enrollment. Those are that's financially, that's where the resources come from. And so we've got to leverage each of those opportunities. Norm and Jacob and Tom and Jim DeMary and others in the dean's office created a good cadence of kind of meeting regularly and matching up our fundraising opportunities with potential donors. We're continuing that now. But there needs to be an engine of fundraising. I've got up here 3X investment. If you take all of the dollars spent on fundraising to accomplish it, it's something on the order of maybe $100,000 to $200,000 a year. I think that's underinvested. I think we need to be spending more because it's the best ROI that we get. If you could double this, if you could go from $200,000 to $400,000 and change your annual cum in donations from 1 million to 2 million, that's a pretty good investment, right? I think we're underinvested there. And at some point, we're going to get the goals from the comprehensive campaign in about a month, and we're the business school. They're going to be significant. We want to make our contribution there, but ultimately we want the resources for what we're trying to accomplish. We are hiring a new development officer, and that will hopefully we'll have that answer soon. Executive education, that's not housed in the School of Business. Don was with us before, and he's here now, and he's over that right now. But that's another area that we really need to develop, and it's also an opportunity, when done right, to bring additional resources to faculty on top of their current salaries. And it creates great motivators for us to level up our teaching so that we can do that, which benefits our undergraduate and our graduate programs. This is just the breakdown. I've been involved in some of that out at Berkeley, and their breakdown in a recent year was 20% contribution in those efforts. The average in the United States for an exec ed program is about 20 million. Last year there was a 40% drop to 13 million, but let's say we had an average of 20 million. We may not get to 20 million initially. What if we could get to 5 or 10 million? If we could get at some point in a few years, maybe it'd take longer, but maybe that's a stretch goal. If we could get, is that a stretch goal, Don?
Yes.
Okay. If we could get to 10 million, that's a million, that's 2 million each year spin off in contribution. Our endowment isn't even fully vested. When it is, that's only $800,000 a year. So this could be a significant source of resources for us, but it also is going to take some significant investment in order to make this work, and we can't do it without great T1 faculty. We just can't. Enrollment, we've already talked a lot about that. In the interest of time, I don't want to go further in that, but I've talked about how critical it is that we have great programs that are cutting edge, and we talked about where our numbers were at convocation. We're a little bit down, but is it too much to ask if we could target 10% growth in enrollment through great programs? That's probably a stretch goal, but it is a goal. It's something we can start comparing to even in down years. There's ways to try to approach that. Finally, in operations, we have goals to make. Okay, this comes, thanks Brett, this comes from, you can't have too many goals. Some of you are familiar with 4DX we need goals in fundraising. We need goals in what I'm calling our Wolverlytics, because I'm a marketer. But the ultimate goal, as we've said, that's 5-star careers, okay? So we have things to do in culture. We have things to do with data streams to kind of map out our process, which I've shown you some preliminary ideas, but there's more that can be done there to really say, what is the recruiting through retention, through teaching, through placement, through alumni support process? What are the key metrics that measure success there, and how do we raise those up so that they're first at parity with leading schools in Utah, and then we start surpassing those metrics and getting in the T1 space? We can't do it without the data, and we can't do it without focus on those key goals. Here's my Wolverlytics. We're out of time. My undergraduate is engineering. Most of you know me well enough how much I try to model something and bring the data into it, so I'm not going to talk about that right now. I'm just going to say, if we do this well, where do we end up? This is an aerial of the buildings at the U right now. We're not trying to be the University of Utah, but they have 4 business buildings. Why? Because they're doing something so valuable that a lot of people want to concentrate their resources there. It's the students that are most important. It's the lifting of the economy that we care about. But this is a signal of something that the market says, what you're doing is valuable. I want the market to come to us and say, what you're doing is valuable. What you're doing is making a difference. I wouldn't mind having a second business building sooner rather than later, because we need that to support all the things that we're doing. Like no more than 10 years before we're really breaking ground, for example. That's silly. I'm dreaming too big. You're crazy, Stephen. But if I have a weakness, it's not dreaming small. So that's where I want to take us. I can't do it without you because I'm actually not very effective or good at anything. I just care about the school and I want to make a difference. So with that said, I'll open it up for questions. Thank you. Oh, they've got a mic down here, and I guess they would like, what?
Oh, it is on? Okay, perfect.
They'd like I think they'd like people, if you have a question, to come down and use the mic. Is that right? Or are we going to roam with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Use the mic so they can hear you on the recording.
Yeah, that's for the recording. I have 2 mics. I've never been double mic'd. So it's a new for me. It's one for the left ear and one for the right. As my calculus teacher once said, questions, comments, pleas for mercy. Gary.
It's a little disincentive to go clear down there. Can I
and then I'll repeat it. Okay?
So I think there's something unique about our students. You're talking about the vision, what we need to do,
Yes.
faculty and staff to get to achieve this vision. Is there something unique about our students? Let me ask the question this way. Characterize the current state of, if you take a composite of the best students that come out of.
If you took a composite of the best students coming out of graduates out of WSB, characterize in terms of brand attributes, 1 to 3 words, Stephen, what the current composite best student coming out looks like, and I'll give you 1 word right now: scrappy.
Yes, I was going to say grit, but scrappy works.
Right?
Yeah.
But now look 5 years down the road. I don't know, 3 to 5, 3 to 7 years down the road. Aspirationally, what kind of brand attributes do you want our graduates to demonstrate?
Because scrappy or hungry, that's describing our inputs, for sure. Hopefully outputs as well, but those inputs are really critical, and we don't want to change to other markets. I mean, this is the market that we're serving. If T1, if we're really teaching with these multi-X outcomes for these students, okay, then they're going to walk out at least knowledgeable, competent, and service-oriented. Okay, I want to grow our community. I want to make a difference. The generation right now is already somewhat service-oriented more than previous generations, if you look at kind of demographic kinds of ideas. But you remind me of some other significant challenges. If you look at a BYU and they bring into their business school, which is a different mission, a different position, a different space, they're bringing in people who are 9s. And they stamp their forehead through as they go through these classes. Certainly they learn some things and have some great experiences and they're good people, but they kind of turn from 9s to 10s and they get that stamp along the way. And so their numbers were just, on Monday I was talking with their dean and she said that their 90-day placement rate is 98%. Okay? We're not going to hit 98%, partly because of our inputs. Okay? Right now, if you saw in convocation, our 2021 day of graduation, and for comparables, BYU's last year was 20 and 21, their comparable was 80%. Our placement rate was 60%. Okay? So that gives us metrics, A, to start working on, but 40%, is it, of our students are first generation, right? They need to be taught how to college. And we have to respect those ideas. That doesn't change, however, the fact that if we do our job really, really well, donors are going to kind of come and make a difference there and invest in that. And more students are want to come and enroll because they get these, they learn so well that they have these good experiences and they launch well into their careers. And that also is going to affect our executive education. So I think the different composition of our student body doesn't necessarily negate or diminish what we're talking about strategically here. Is that fair? Or? Okay. Other questions?
What do you think our biggest challenge is?
Right now, I think, if you want me to choose one, I think it's a dearth of that makes it hard for us to diagnose the problems we need to solve. And right now, we deal with a lot of variability in various areas of the business school and the university. If we had better measurements of that variability, we can then kind of focus on it and say, let's reduce that and lift those metrics to where they need to be. But if I'm saying there's a second runner-up or a tie or a contender for that, I think these issues that I've been talking about with culture, I think we need to level up more in culture to enable any of this to happen. So it happens at the team level, it happens at the interpersonal level, it happens at the school level, at the university level. I think there's there's more to do there. So there's obviously lots of things that we could address, but part of being a leader is just being a problem solver, right? In fact, no one will pay you to solve a non-problem. So problems aren't exactly a bad thing. They're just a fact of life, and then we create value by solving them and moving forward.
Thank you. One other question. Obviously, you mentioned our endowment invested is $800,000, which is penance, right? For anything that we want to accomplish.
Right.
Also, with a lot of our fundraising, we're about to start a new big fundraising campaign for the university and things like that. We'll get a percentage of that, but a lot of the donors will come from our contacts here in the business school and stuff. How do we go about getting that endowment way up? How do we go about getting our portion? I mean, don't get me wrong, I haven't been in these meetings and I don't fully understand the campaign. I'm excited to the launch it.
Right.
I understand that more. But if we don't take matters into our own hands, we'll continue to have the status quo, right? We'll continue to do what we're going to do. So how do we really take the business school and take that up while still supporting the university?
So I think there's a few things. One, the endowment itself is not the only way to leverage donations, right? So if we can put valuable ideas in front of donors that they want to fund outside of the endowment, but we still get those funds and can leverage those to kind of create staff, for example. Could we fund all the staff in the Entrepreneurship Institute and more with donations that aren't necessarily part of that endowment or growing an endowment? So there's multiple channels for where those donor dollars can go. Another thing is, I think the university has a history of not really leveraging well our alumni network, and it grows bigger and bigger. David Presbila and I have had some great conversations of ways we could leverage, for example, these because they need buy-in. If they're going to come back and donate to us, they need to be connected. They need to be it's back to this relationship idea. One thing that his MBA program does is they create once they graduate with the MBA, he can go back for the rest of his life and get the notes for the updated version of all the courses he took. That keeps him connected to that program, and then when they ask him for annual donor dollars, he gives a bigger donation and a more regular donation than he would have without that relatively simple effort to keep connected. And there's things that we can do to kind of raise that level of engagement to leverage the alumni network. That's a slow haul because we're not branded, we're not a Harvard. I mean, Harvard's, we're not a BYU. We're going back to our positioning. It will take us time to use that position to develop a brand strong enough that it becomes, as Diego and I were talking about once, truly a brand of pride for faculty, students, graduates. And when we hit that point, then all of this conversation changes. Those donations increase. People want to engage more. And I wonder if there's maybe some tipping point kind of mechanism that's going to be occurring there.
Oh, I have a question.
Oh.
It's Amy.
Oh, there you go. Hi, Amy.
Hi. I asked you this already, but can you tell us why you changed your mind from interim to full-time dean, number one? And you've seen the competition. I'm wondering what makes you the best candidate.
Okay. So the first time I thought about being a dean was when someone texted me a week before I was asked to be dean and said, "Have you ever thought about this and considered it?" As you know, in the marketing department, I was not interested in being chair and had to be talked into it. But then the marketing department taught me some really valuable lessons. There were some hard struggles for us, and I'm not saying I was a perfect chair, but I love where we got to in the time that I got to be in that position, and I love where you're even headed now with Mitch in that chair moving forward. I think really good things happened there, and I grew as a part of that. And so I didn't think I was capable of being a dean, and then I was asked to be dean as interim, and within a month I started realizing that instead of worrying about my weaknesses, I need to leverage my strengths and build a team around me. And Brett and I have had these conversations. I need to build a team around me that helps me shore up the weaknesses that I have. But quite frankly, that's how we all need to be doing it anyway. I've been too independent most of my life, and as I get more wise, dare I say that, as I grow, as I mature, I realize, A, we've got to do it together. There's just too much to do for one person to try to do it. And B, why wouldn't we do it together? Because it's funner, and everybody gets lifted. Everybody involved in the effort. And so when I kind of came up with those realizations and realized, as a teacher, I love to teach, but as a teacher, I might help hundreds they go on and help thousands. As a dean, I might have the opportunity to help thousands all of us would have the opportunity to help thousands, and they might go and help millions. I came to a point where I just felt like I didn't want to turn that down. And the last thing is, I'm a little nervous that an external candidate would come in and not see what we're doing, draw the wrong conclusions, and start taking us backwards. If one of these candidates would be a better dean than me, then I want them to be in the chair. If I'm offered the job, I'd be very excited. We have work to do. If I'm not offered the job and the person who gets in the chair is better, I'll breathe a big sigh of relief, and I'll look for my next growth path. But I think there's a danger with an external candidate. It could be great, but there is a danger that they don't really see what we're trying to do or buy into it and start taking us a direction that I don't think would be productive for what we're really trying to do. Thanks, Amy. I didn't ask her to ask that, but I appreciate the question. Maritza.
Yes. So if you get the job,
Yes.
right, much of your, or significant part of your time needs to be dedicated to be fundraising.
That's right.
And donors.
Yes.
And talking to people, and then we will see you again.
Will you see me again?
Here. So how you gonna balance your role as somebody who needs to bring money for all the things we wanted to do, and to have presence and be the leader that we want to have as being the leaders of all the things you are saying.
Right.
And second is, some of the words that I haven't heard from you is our relation, our role with the community.
Yes.
You talk about business.
Yes.
That's fine. We have that too. But we have a role also with the Utah community, with the Utah state, as part of the community. And I think if you can just extend a little bit more about that role, or what we're going to do besides bringing a job force for the businesses.
Yeah. So let's start with the second. I had a good conversation with Bridget, who's the dean of the Marriott School at BYU on Monday. And we had just been exposed to a really great presentation on kind of a community of doctors right now that are all competitors with each other, that are working together to lift medical practice in Utah right now. And she and I were talking about, we can be friendly competitors. Not that BYU is a competitor to us. We really kind of touch different markets, but to some extent. Working together to lift all of Utah is a really kind of fun and interesting prospect to me. And when I say lift, we're a leadership and management school. That's not exclusive to businesses. I talk about businesses, and that's where a lot of our resources are going to come. But we need leaders in government. We need leaders in our organizations. We need managers in these spaces. We're a school of leadership and management. And so I think anything that we're talking about in the business school along these lines does touch to these kind of efforts in the community, even on social issues, right? How do you solve a social issue with a nonprofit that's run poorly? So I think we have a lot to contribute in all the different faces of the state. Going back to how do I do it, and that goes back to teams. I don't do it. I do some of it, but we need a good team of people that that are focused on the various things that need to happen, and also there's this kind of dual purpose. Gary might know when you're a product manager, you've got to be out with your customers a lot, so you understand the problems they're really facing and the conditions that they're operating your product in, and that gives you insights that you can't get any other way. And so in some sense, being out with the community, being out with potential donors, being out with connected relationships, that is going to bring a lot of insight that then comes back when I'm here, that informs everything that we're doing here. But yeah, I will be out. Out is a strong word. There will be travel. A lot of it, as Tom has helped us see, Tom is great at external relations, and a lot of it happens here, inviting the people here, and showing them what we've got. And with a new business building, it's even easier. They want to come and be a part of that. And so we can take some of those extra resources that I've been talking about and bring on more people to really kind of leverage those opportunities instead of right now where we deal with them much more on an ad hoc basis, case by case. Let's get an engine up and running where we're inviting people, we're meeting with them. Some of those turn into great relationships, others turn into partnerships. It's not all money, there's influence, there's government, there's all kinds of things that we can leverage that. But part of the answer is, yeah, I won't always be here, but if we have a good team, that's okay. I have this theme, and it's short questions, long answers. That's something I've never been able to overcome.
Up at the top.
Oh, yeah.
So we have a population of students that have a hard time with the matriculation courses, not necessarily because of the difficulty level, but because of the difficulty of identifying with them.
Yes.
There we go. Once a PFP student gets into the PFP core classes, they love it. Same with marketing, any of the other degrees. What would you recommend for a faculty or staff member when they come across one of these students that are having a hard time identifying the purpose between those matriculation courses and the purpose here?
A couple things. One, all of us face this as professors on a regular basis. As a professor, motivation matters. If we can't help that student understand the why, then their motivation to learn is dramatically reduced. We understand that, but I think that's easier for our practitioner faculty. They're out there in industry doing this on a day-to-day basis, and they tell their stories, and those stories, right, kind of lift up that enthusiasm. Students say, oh, I get it. I'm an SA faculty, I'm a research faculty. I haven't spent as much time in industry, certainly not in long-term kind of professional career positions, as our professional faculty, and so it's more of a challenge, and I think that's probably true with some of our other research faculty. We have those that have worked in industry, and that's helpful, but we also have many who haven't. So when I can engage in practices that increase my detailed understanding of those skin in the game kinds of experiences through externships and consulting, and even well, here's something. Matt and Raquel have created a great introductory course that showcases through interviews and other things, all these different career paths. And it's in its infancy. We've only, these things will level up, but there's so many ways that we already have developed resources that we can be exposing students to say, this is what a career path like that looks like. And in that career path, these are the things you're going to do on a day-to-day basis. I think that last part, though, the hardest is for the SA faculty, and we need to put in, just like professional faculty have to put in a greater effort to understand what's true and to stamp out their folklore, the research faculty have to put in a greater effort to reach out and understand what matters, what's useful, and get rid of the stuff that they're teaching that really doesn't have much play. So they always have an answer to that question of, this is why this matters to you on day one when you get into your job. Or sometimes it won't matter on day one, but it will matter to a successful career. Thanks. Don.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I'm going to put you on hold there, Don.
Oh.
We are out of time, so we're going to go ahead and end the recording, and thank you very much for your presentation. We do have another 45 minutes scheduled for Q&A, so you're welcome to move down closer, and we can kind of have more of an intimate discussion and questions, or you're welcome to leave if you need to leave at this time.
Then you can ask your real questions.
Yes, exactly.
And all
you
my
so much.
plants, you can, no, never mind. Thank you for coming, I really appreciate it.